Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to thank the Village of Glendale and everyone who showed out today and braved the heat to come listen to everyone here speak. I suppose I should begin by answering a simple question, and that is, what is Memorial Day? It's more than just a day to take the day off from work, to cook out, go to ball games, and I think the fact that you're all here tells me that you understand something about that. It's not even a day to honor our living veterans, although the men standing behind me and in the crowd right now appreciate the gratitude and would like to stop and offer them a hand right now. Above all else, Memorial Day is a day when we honor and remember those Americans who have willingly laid down their lives in the defense of the freedoms that we all enjoy. We often hear numbers on the news or read them in history books. 8,000 dead at the Battle of Gettysburg in 1863, 3,000 dead at Leyte Gulf in 1944, 12,000 dead at Okinawa in 1945, or 425 dead last year in Iraq and Afghanistan. Numbers don't tell the whole story, because behind each of these numbers, there's a family waiting at home who's never going to see that loved one ever again. In order for us to understand what Memorial Day is all about, we have to understand these numbers as individuals. To do that, I first must talk about something that makes us as a culture uncomfortable, and that is death. Death in our culture is something that is kept away from us. It's confined to hospitals and hospices, and we talk about it in code to soften the blow. We talk about somebody who passed away. We talk about how they're no longer with us. We hope that when our loved ones eventually do pass on, that they do so quietly and peacefully. And then after they die, we console ourselves by saying things like, at least he lived a full life, or at least she wasn't in any pain. A soldier's death, on the other hand, tends to mirror his last few hours on the earth. He's probably too hot or too cold, hungry, thirsty, wet, tired, above all else, terrified. His last moments on the earth are probably spent surrounded by his dead and dying friends. While all these things serve to separate a soldier's dying from a normal person's dying, that's not why we're here today. That's not why we honor these men. We honor them for the manner in which they lived their lives. Because what really separates them from everybody else is that they make a conscious decision to place themselves between the country that they love and those who would do that country harm. It's not that they're not afraid to die, it's that they love their country more than they fear death. Specialist Jim Boots understood this principle and lived it. He was a medic in my battalion and served in Western Afghanistan with the Marine Special Operations Unit. During a dismounted patrol, 2 reconnaissance Marines triggered an improvised explosive device and were mortally wounded. Hearing the explosion and paying no heed for their own safety, Specialist Boots and a Navy corpsman thought only of helping those wounded Marines and sprinted to help them. That's what they were doing when they too triggered a second IED and were both killed. Staff Sergeant Donald Stacy was a natural leader, loved and respected by his men. He was a good friend of mine outside of work. He possessed those 2 most important qualities that all combat leadership have. He was smart and he was aggressive. It was that intelligence and aggression that led him to be leading his men that day, as he always did, from the front, always demonstrating by example. That's where he was when he stepped on another improvised explosive device and was mortally wounded, dying later that day. Sergeant First Class Benjamin Wise was a medic from the 1st Special Forces Group who's attached to our battalion in northern Afghanistan. While serving as a medic on a raid to kill or capture a high-value Taliban leader, friendly forces became pinned down by a Taliban machine gun position hidden in the entrance to a cave. Sergeant Wise knew immediately what he had to do. Paying no heed to his own safety, he got out from behind the relative shelter of a large boulder and charged at the machine gun, firing his weapon to suppress the enemy and allow our friendly forces to maneuver. he was killed by small arms fire. Each of these three men had reasons to choose a safer line of work, to stay home. Each of them had families who loved them very much. Specialist Boots left behind his parents and a brother. Staff Sergeant Stacy left behind his mother. Sergeant First Class Wise left behind his wife and 3 small children. Furthermore, he was the second son that his parents had to bury as a result of the war in Afghanistan. His older brother had been killed there in 2009. Each of these deaths is a life cut short. A life of hopes, dreams, goals, and fears little different than our own. The dead leave behind loved ones who are faced with the overwhelming task of picking up the pieces and attempting to move on with their lives. So now that we're aware of the sacrifices made by these men on our behalf and the suffering of the loved ones left behind, we face the most difficult task of all, earning it. It was a similar theme that inspired Lieutenant Colonel John McRae to sit down and write a poem during a different war almost 100 years ago. Colonel McRae was an officer in the Canadian Expeditionary Force and had just fought in the Second Battle of Ypres. He had just buried his best friend and was reflecting on the loss of so many comrades. Looking across the fields of headstones stretching as far as the eye could see, he noticed that bright red poppies seemed to grow among the tombstones. He sat down to write. In Flanders fields, the poppies blow between the crosses, row on row, that mark our place. And in the sky, the larks, still bravely singing, fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago, we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you, from failing hands, we throw the torch. Be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, though poppies grow in Flanders fields. So the question we have to answer is, how do we earn this sacrifice? How do we carry the torch, as Colonel McRae so eloquently put it? Well, it's something that's going to look a little different for each of us. For some people, it might mean putting aside your reservations and putting on a uniform. For others, it means taking time out of your schedule to teach and mentor a young person who wasn't blessed with the same opportunities that you might have been blessed with. For others still, it's as simple as being informed and exercising your right to vote. That's important. What it boils down to is that each of us has a role to play in forming this more perfect union. Men and women have paid a heavy price in blood for a dream that is America, and it falls on us to continue their work by making this dream a reality. The importance of this task cannot be overstated. If we fail, if we break faith with those who die, we fail not only ourselves, but the dead as well. They are watching us, and they are judging our sacrifice against their own. Let us not disappoint them. Let us make them as proud of us as we are of them. Thank you. May God bless the families of all of our fallen warriors, and may He continue to bless America.